Jack Miller drove down a narrow dirt road, his car kicking up dust as he made his way toward Tau Farm. It was early morning, and the air smelled like fresh earth mixed with the faint scent of diesel fuel. He glanced out the window at the endless fields of corn stretching out on either side of him. This part of Ohio was quiet, almost too quiet, but Jack didn't mind. After years spent working in noisy automotive plants, the silence felt refreshing. When he finally arrived at the farm, he couldn't help but notice how strange it looked. On one side, there were old red barns with chipped paint and rusty roofs. Chickens wandered around aimlessly, pecking at the ground. There were even a couple of tractors sitting unused near the edge of the property. But right next to all this, standing out like a sore thumb, was a massive steel building. Its shiny surface reflected the pale sunlight, making it look completely out of place among the worn-down structures. Jack parked his car near the main entrance and stepped out. He adjusted his tie nervously before grabbing his briefcase from the passenger seat. Today was his first day at Tau Farm, and he wanted to make a good impression. As he walked toward the office, he spotted a woman waiting for him by the door. She had short brown hair tied back into a neat ponytail and wore practical work boots along with jeans and a dark jacket. Her name tag read Clara. "You must be Jack," she said, shaking his hand firmly. Her grip was strong, and her voice carried an air of authority. "Welcome to Tau Farm. I'll be showing you around today." "Thanks," Jack replied, trying to sound confident despite feeling slightly overwhelmed. "It's quite different from what I expected," Clara smirked. "Most people say that when they first get here. Don't let the barns fool you. This isn't just any ordinary farm." She led him inside the office, which was surprisingly modern compared to the exterior. The walls were painted white, and sleek desks lined the room. Computers hummed softly as employees typed away at their keyboards. Clara introduced him to a few coworkers whose names he immediately forgot, before guiding him toward the factory floor. As they approached the large steel doors leading into the production area, Clara paused. "Before we go in, I should warn you. What you're about to see isn't something most people ever get to witness. We take pride in our work here, but it's also highly confidential, so keep your eyes open and your mouth shut, okay?" Jack nodded, intrigued. He followed her through the doors, and suddenly the world changed. The noise hit him first, a constant hum of machinery combined with the clinking of metal parts being assembled. Bright fluorescent lights illuminated rows upon rows of robotic arms moving with incredible speed and precision. Each arm performed a specific task: welding, screwing bolts into place, attaching stocks to barrels. The entire process was mesmerizing. "These robots assemble AR-15s, Clara explained loudly over the din. "We produce thousands of them every year. Every single rifle is built with exact specifications, ensuring top-quality performance." Jack stared in awe. He had worked with automated systems before, but nothing quite like this. The efficiency was staggering. Conveyor belts carried unfinished rifles from one station to another, each step bringing them closer to completion. Workers in blue uniforms monitored the machines, occasionally stepping in to fix minor issues or inspect finished products. "What happens after they're done?" Jack asked, pointing to a line of completed rifles being boxed up and loaded onto pallets. "They're shipped out to distributors," Clara replied. "Some go to military contractors, others to civilian markets. Demand is always high." Jack nodded thoughtfully. He understood why Tau Farm needed someone like him, an engineer skilled in designing and maintaining complex machinery. With such a high volume of production, even small improvements could save the company millions. As they continued their tour, Clara pointed out various sections of the factory. There was a quality control department where rifles underwent rigorous testing, a research lab dedicated to developing new designs, and a warehouse filled with raw materials waiting to be transformed into weapons. Despite the impressive setup, Jack couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Maybe it was the contrast between the rustic farm outside and the futuristic factory within. Or maybe it was the way Clara spoke so casually about producing firearms capable of causing so much destruction. Whatever it was, it left a nagging sensation in the back of his mind. By lunchtime, Jack's head was spinning with information. Clara took him to the cafeteria, a small but cozy space decorated with posters of vintage tractors and farming equipment. They sat together at a table near the window, where they could watch workers come and go. "So, what do you think so far?" Clara asked, sipping her coffee. "It's impressive," Jack admitted. "But I have to ask, why call it Tau Farm? Seems kind of misleading, doesn't it?" Clara chuckled. The original owners were farmers who started tinkering with gunsmithing as a hobby. Over time, they realized there was more money in guns than crops. They kept the name because it gave them a sense of history, I guess. Plus, it throws people off. Nobody expects a state-of-the-art weapons manufacturer to hide behind a cornfield. Jack laughed, though he still found the whole thing bizarre. He decided not to dwell on it too much. For now, he was just grateful to have landed a job at such an innovative company. Little did he know, however, that his curiosity would soon lead him to uncover secrets far beyond anything he could imagine. After lunch, Clara showed him to his workstation. It was located near the heart of the factory, close enough to hear the steady rhythm of production, but far enough to avoid the worst of the noise. His desk was already stocked with tools, manuals, and a computer preloaded with software for analyzing machine performance. "This is where you'll spend most of your time," Clara said. "If you need anything, don't hesitate to ask. Everyone here is pretty friendly once you get to know them." With that, she left him to settle in. Jack sat down at his desk and opened one of the manuals. As he flipped through the pages, he noticed a map tucked inside. It depicted the layout of the factory, including areas marked as restricted access. One section, labeled simply as Lab B, caught his eye. He wondered what went on behind those closed doors, but quickly dismissed the thought. After all, he had only been hired to improve the assembly lines. What happened elsewhere wasn't his concern, or so he told himself. For the rest of the day, Jack focused on familiarizing himself with the equipment. He ran diagnostics on several robotic arms, identified potential bottlenecks in the production process, and jotted down ideas for streamlining operations. By the time evening rolled around, he felt both exhausted and exhilarated. This was exactly the kind of challenge he thrived on. As he packed up to leave, Clara stopped by his desk again. "How was your first day?" she asked. "Great," Jack replied honestly. "I think I'm going to enjoy working here." Clara smiled. "Good. Just remember what I said earlier. Eyes open, mouth shut. You'll do fine." With that cryptic reminder, she turned and walked away, leaving Jack alone with his thoughts. He locked up his workstation and headed back to his car, glancing once more at the strange juxtaposition of old barns and cutting-edge technology. Something about Tau Farm fascinated him, though he couldn't quite put his finger on it. All he knew was that he had stumbled into a world unlike any other, and he couldn't wait to explore it further. By the end of his second week at Tau Farm, Jack Miller had settled into a routine. Each morning he would arrive early, grab a cup of coffee from the cafeteria, and head straight to his workstation. His days were filled with analyzing data, tweaking robotic systems, and brainstorming ways to make the assembly process even faster. Despite the monotony of some tasks, he found himself enjoying the challenge. Every time he solved a problem or improved efficiency, it gave him a small sense of accomplishment. Clara continued to check in on him regularly, offering guidance when needed, but mostly leaving him to his own devices. She seemed pleased with his progress, often praising his attention to detail and innovative ideas. Yet there was always an edge to her demeanor, a subtle tension that made Jack wonder if she knew more than she let on. Whenever he asked questions about restricted areas or unusual activities, she deflected them with vague answers or changed the subject entirely. One evening, after most employees had gone home, Jack stayed late to finish calibrating a particularly tricky robotic arm. The factory floor was eerily quiet without the constant hum of machinery. Shadows stretched long across the polished concrete, cast by the fading light filtering through high windows. As he worked, Jack noticed movement out of the corner of his eye. Turning his head, he saw two figures standing near one of the restricted zones, a tall man in a security uniform and a shorter woman carrying a clipboard. The man was Liam, a security officer Jack had met briefly during orientation. He had a stern face and rarely smiled, giving off an intimidating vibe. The woman was Rachel, a logistics coordinator who oversaw shipments coming in and out of the facility. Jack didn't know much about her, except that she always seemed busy and stressed. Curious, Jack pretended to focus on his work while listening intently to their conversation. Their voices were low, but snippets drifted toward him as they argued. "They're watching us," Liam muttered, glancing over his shoulder, nervously. "If we don't deliver next week," Rachel cut him off sharply. "We'll deal with it when the time comes. For now, just keep your mouth shut." Jack froze, his fingers hovering over the keyboard. Deliver what? And who was watching them? Before he could piece together any answers, Liam spotted him eavesdropping. His expression hardened, and he leaned closer to Rachel, whispering urgently. Without another word, the pair turned and walked briskly away, disappearing behind a set of double doors. For a moment, Jack considered following them, but caution got the better of him. Instead, he finished his task and headed back to his desk, his mind racing. What had he stumbled upon? Was this related to the restricted areas Clara refused to talk about? Over the next few days, Jack became increasingly preoccupied with finding answers. He started paying closer attention to the comings and goings around the factory. Late-night deliveries arrived almost daily, trucks pulling up to loading docks under heavy guard. Forklifts moved crates bearing strange symbols into secure sections of the building. Workers whispered among themselves, though they fell silent. Whenever anyone approached, determined to uncover the truth, Jack began asking discreet questions. Most people shrugged him off, claiming ignorance or urging him not to pry. But one co-worker, Ethan, proved more forthcoming. A wiry man in his mid-30s with glasses perpetually sliding down his nose, Ethan worked in maintenance and seemed to know everyone's business. "Special projects," Ethan said cryptically, when Jack casually mentioned the restricted zones. "That's all I can tell you. Just focus on your work. You don't want to dig too deep here." The warning only fueled Jack's curiosity. If anything, it confirmed his suspicions. Something unusual and possibly dangerous was happening at Tau Farm. Late one night, unable to sleep, Jack decided to take matters into his own hands. Using blueprints he'd found in the engineering department, he located a maintenance tunnel branching off from the main building. It wasn't marked on any official maps, which made it all the more intriguing. Armed with a flashlight and a notebook, he slipped into the tunnel, heart pounding with a mix of excitement and fear. The passage was narrow and poorly lit, the air thick with the smell of oil and damp concrete. Pipes clanked overhead, and water dripped steadily onto the floor. Jack moved cautiously, shining his flashlight ahead to illuminate the way. After several minutes, he reached a junction where the tunnel split in two directions. One path led deeper underground, while the other veered toward what appeared to be a locked steel door. As he approached the door, he noticed faint noises emanating. From the other side, low murmurs, metallic clangs, and the occasional beep of machinery. Pressing his ear against the cold surface, he strained to hear more clearly. Someone inside was talking about calibration tests and neural interfaces. The phrases meant little to him, but they sounded unsettlingly advanced. Suddenly, footsteps echoed down the corridor behind him. Panicking, Jack ducked into a recessed alcove, holding his breath as a pair of guards passed by. They didn't seem to notice him, but their presence confirmed his worst fears. This area was heavily monitored. Once they were gone, Jack retreated back the way he came, adrenaline coursing through his veins. Whatever lay beyond that door, it wasn't meant for prying eyes. Still, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was onto something big, something that could change everything he thought he knew about Tau Farm. Back in his apartment later that night, Jack poured himself a glass of whiskey and tried to process what he'd seen. The pieces of the puzzle weren't fitting together yet, but he was certain of one thing. This place wasn't just mass-producing firearms. There was something else going on beneath the surface, something far more sinister. The next morning, Jack arrived at work earlier than usual, hoping to catch Clara alone. He found her in the cafeteria, sipping coffee and reading a report. Taking a deep breath, he sat down across from her. "I need to ask you something," he said, his tone serious. "What exactly is happening in those restricted areas?" Clara looked up, startled. For a moment, she said nothing, her eyes narrowing slightly. Then she sighed and leaned back in her chair. "Jack, I warned you before, eyes open, mouth shut. Some things are better left unknown." "But I already know something's wrong," he insisted. "I saw those deliveries, heard the conversations. People are acting like they're hiding secrets." "What's really going on here?" Clara hesitated, clearly torn between loyalty to the company and sympathy for Jack's growing unease. Finally, she spoke in a low voice. "This isn't just about guns, Jack. We're developing technology for someone else. Someone powerful. That's all I can say. If you value your safety, drop it." Her words sent a chill down his spine. Someone powerful? Technology? Jack felt like he was teetering on the edge of a massive conspiracy, and every instinct told him to keep digging. But he also knew he couldn't do it alone. After thanking Clara for her honesty, or partial honesty, he returned to his workstation, mind racing. Over the next few days, he observed everything more closely. The patterns of security patrols, the timing of deliveries, the behavior of his co-workers. Slowly but surely, he began piecing together a plan. If he wanted answers, he would need help. Ethan was the obvious choice. Though initially reluctant, the maintenance worker eventually agreed to assist Jack, albeit reluctantly. "You're playing with fire," Ethan warned. "But if you're dead set on this, I'll back you up. Just don't drag me down with you." Together, they devised a strategy to gather evidence. Jack would use his access to the factory's systems to monitor activity in real time, while Ethan kept an eye on physical movements around the restricted zones. They communicated sparingly, exchanging notes in code to avoid suspicion. Weeks passed, and their efforts yielded fragments of information. Strange equipment was being tested in the hidden lab. Rumors circulated about experimental weapons capable of altering human behavior. And then there was Project Prometheus, a name whispered in hushed tones, though no one seemed to know its exact purpose. Despite the mounting evidence, Jack couldn't shake the feeling that they were missing something crucial. Whatever Tau Farm was truly hiding, it went beyond mere weapons development. It was bigger, darker, and far more dangerous than he had imagined. And as the days ticked by, Jack realized he might be in over his head. But turning back was no longer an option. Jack Miller's curiosity had reached a breaking point. For weeks, he and Ethan had been gathering fragments of information about Tau Farm's hidden operations. But it wasn't enough. He needed concrete proof, something undeniable that could expose whatever was going on beneath the surface. Armed with blueprints and his growing determination, Jack decided it was time to take a risk. One night, after most workers had left the factory, Jack slipped into the maintenance tunnel again. This time, he came prepared. Alongside his flashlight, he carried a small camera tucked into his pocket and a notepad to jot down quick observations. His heart raced as he navigated the narrow passageway, the sound of dripping water echoing around him. Every step felt like walking deeper into unknown territory. When he reached the locked steel door from his previous exploration, Jack hesitated. It was heavily secured, with an electronic keypad and a red warning light blinking above it. But luck, or perhaps fate, was on his side. As he examined the lock, he noticed a loose panel nearby. Inside, wires snaked together in a tangled mess. Though far from an expert in electronics, Jack recognized enough to attempt bypassing the system. Working quickly, he connected two exposed wires and held his breath. A soft click echoed through the corridor, and the door slid open with a hiss. Jack stepped inside, careful to avoid making noise. What he saw next left him speechless. The room was unlike anything he'd ever imagined. Rows of advanced machinery lined the walls, their surfaces gleaming under artificial light. Strange weapons lay partially assembled on workbenches, rifles with glowing barrels, drones equipped with miniature turrets, and even what looked like prototypes of exoskeleton suits designed for combat. At the center of the chamber stood a massive device labeled Project Prometheus. Its metallic frame pulsed with energy, casting a faint golden glow that illuminated the surrounding area. Jack moved cautiously, snapping photos and scribbling notes as fast as he could. He tried to make sense of the labels and diagrams posted near each station. Some referred to neural interfaces, others mentioned population control protocols. None of it made complete sense, but one thing was clear. These weren't ordinary weapons. They were tools designed for something far more sinister. As he approached Project Prometheus, he noticed a terminal displaying live data streams. Lines of code scrolled across the screen, accompanied by graphs showing fluctuating power levels. A single sentence caught his attention. Behavioral modification successful in 97% of test subjects. Jack's stomach churned. Whatever this machine did, it had the potential to alter human behavior on a massive scale. Before he could investigate further, alarms blared throughout the facility. Red lights flashed overhead, bathing the lab in an ominous glow. Jack froze, his mind racing. Had someone discovered him? Or was this part of a routine security sweep? He didn't have time to ponder. Footsteps thundered down the corridor outside, accompanied by shouted orders. Security teams were closing in. Without hesitation, Jack turned and ran, clutching his camera and notepad tightly. He retraced his steps through the tunnel, heart pounding as voices grew louder behind him. Reaching the junction where the passage split, Jack chose the path leading back toward the main factory floor. Just as he emerged, from the shadows he collided with Clara. Her eyes widened in shock, then narrowed with suspicion. "What are you doing here?" she demanded, grabbing his arm. "There's no time to explain," Jack panted. "They're coming." Clara hesitated for a fraction of a second before pulling him along. "Follow me. We need to get you out of sight." She led him through a maze of corridors until they reached a storage closet. Pushing him inside, she whispered urgently, "Stay here. Don't move until I come back for you." Jack obeyed, crouching among boxes and spare parts while trying to calm his breathing. Minutes stretched into eternity as he listened to the chaos unfolding outside. Guards rushed past, shouting about intruders and breaches. Eventually, the noise faded, and silence returned. When Clara finally opened the door, her expression was grim. "You've dug yourself into a hole, Jack. What did you see?" "Everything," he admitted. "Weapons, experiments, that machine. Project Prometheus, it's not just about guns, is it? You're building tools to control people." Clara sighed, leaning against the wall. "I told you not to dig too deep. But since you already know..." She paused, weighing her words carefully. "Tau Farm isn't working alone. We're fulfilling orders for a shadowy organization, one that operates above governments and laws. They fund our research, provide resources, and demand results. And Project Prometheus? That's their crown jewel. It's supposed to revolutionize warfare. Or so they claim." "But why?" Jack asked, still struggling to grasp the enormity of it all. "Why build something so dangerous?" "To maintain control," Clara replied bitterly. "Imagine being able to manipulate entire populations, turning them into obedient followers without resistance. That's what they want. A world where dissent is impossible." Jack shook his head in disbelief. "And you're okay with this?" "No," Clara snapped. "But I don't have a choice. Neither do you, if you want to stay alive." Her words hit hard, but Jack refused to back down. "Then help me stop them. Together we can expose the truth." Clara stared at him for a long moment, torn between fear and resolve. Finally, she nodded. "All right. But we'll need allies. And a plan. If we're going to pull this off, we'll have to be smarter than they are." Over the next few days, Jack, Clara, and Ethan worked tirelessly to devise a strategy. Using Jack's photos and notes, they pieced together a detailed dossier on Tau Farm's activities. They identified key players within the organization, mapped out security patterns, and pinpointed vulnerabilities in the facility's systems. Their ultimate goal was simple, yet daring: smuggle evidence out of the factory and leak it to the press. But getting the data off-site would require precision and timing. Any misstep could mean capture, or worse. To execute their plan, they enlisted the help of Rachel, the logistics coordinator Jack had overheard arguing with Liam weeks earlier. Though initially hesitant, Rachel agreed to assist once she learned the full scope of the operation. Her access to shipping schedules proved invaluable, allowing them to coordinate their movements without arousing suspicion. As the day of the operation approached, tension hung thick in the air. Each member of the team knew the risks involved, but none of them wavered. They had uncovered a conspiracy that threatened millions, and failure wasn't an option. On the chosen night, everything went according to plan. At first, Jack and Ethan infiltrated the hidden lab, downloading critical files onto encrypted drives while Clara and Rachel kept watch. The four of them moved like clockwork, their actions rehearsed to perfection. But just as they prepared to leave, disaster struck. Liam, the security officer, intercepted their communications. Realizing what they were up to, he alerted upper management. Within minutes, the factory went into lockdown, and armed guards swarmed the tunnels. Cornered in the maintenance passage, the group narrowly escaped capture thanks to Ethan's quick thinking. He triggered a diversion by sabotaging the assembly, lines causing chaos on the factory floor. Amid the confusion, they managed to reach the hidden lab once more. Inside, they discovered a cache of documents detailing Project Prometheus's true purpose, a neural interface capable of manipulating human behavior on a mass scale. The implications were horrifying. If deployed, it could turn soldiers and civilians into obedient puppets controlled remotely. Realizing they couldn't destroy the machine themselves, they uploaded the data to an encrypted server and fled the facility. As they raced toward freedom, explosions rocked the compound behind them. Someone, or something, was determined to erase all traces of the project. Breathless and shaken, Jack glanced back at the burning factory. For the first time, he allowed himself to feel hope. They had done it. They had exposed the truth. But as Clara reminded him, their fight was far from over. The shadowy organization behind Tau Farm remained active, its influence stretching across borders and industries, and, somewhere buried beneath the ruins of Tau Farm, the remnants of Project Prometheus waited silently, for the day someone might try again. The explosion behind them was deafening, shaking the earth beneath their feet as Jack, Clara, Ethan, and Rachel sprinted across the open field. Flames licked at the night sky, painting the landscape in shades of orange and red. The factory at Tau Farm was collapsing under the weight of its own secrets, reduced to smoldering ruins. Though they had escaped the immediate danger, none of them dared to slow down. They knew better than to believe they were safe. Not yet. Jack glanced over, his shoulder watching as plumes of black smoke rose into the air. His lungs burned from the effort of running, but he pushed forward, clutching the encrypted drive containing evidence of Project Prometheus. Every step felt like a victory, but every breath reminded him of how close they'd come to failure. If Ethan hadn't triggered the diversion when he did, they would have been caught, or worse. Clara led the way, her movements quick and deliberate despite the uneven terrain. She had grown up in this part of Ohio and knew the land well enough to guide them away from the main roads. "Stick together," she called out, her voice barely audible over the roar of the fire behind them. "We can't afford to split up now." Ethan brought up the rear, glancing nervously over his shoulder. Armed guards could still be seen in the distance, their flashlights sweeping the fields as they searched for the fugitives. "They're not giving up," he muttered, his tone grim. "We need to put more distance between us and them." Rachel nodded, her face pale but determined. She carried a small handheld device that emitted a faint blue glow, a portable GPS tracker she had grabbed during their escape. It displayed nearby landmarks, helping them navigate through the dark. "There's an old barn about half a mile ahead," she said. "If we can reach it, we might be able to hide until morning." The group pressed on, their pace slowing slightly, as exhaustion began to take its toll. The adrenaline that had fueled their escape was fading, leaving only raw determination. As they approached the barn, they spotted a narrow creek winding through the field. Clara motioned for them to follow its path, reasoning that water would obscure their tracks. When they finally reached the barn, It was even more decrepit than it looked from afar. The wooden walls leaned precariously, and the roof sagged under years of neglect. Still, it offered shelter and a chance to catch their breath. Clara pushed open the creaky door, holding it steady while the others filed inside. Once inside, they collapsed onto piles of hay scattered across the floor. For several minutes, no one spoke. The silence was broken only by the sound of their labored breathing and the occasional rustle of wind outside. Finally, Jack broke the quiet. "We did it," he said softly, looking around at the group. "We got the files. We exposed the truth." Clara shook her head, her expression somber. "Not yet, we haven't. Getting the data off-site is only the first step. Now we need to figure out how to release it without getting ourselves killed." Ethan rubbed his temples, clearly overwhelmed. "Do you realize what we're dealing with here? This isn't just some rogue company. We're talking about a global organization with unlimited resources. Even if we leak the information, they'll find ways to cover it up, or worse, they'll come after us." Rachel placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "We don't have a choice, Ethan. If we stay silent, they win. And if Project Prometheus falls into the wrong hands—" She trailed off, unable to finish the thought. Jack opened his backpack and pulled out the encrypted drive. He held it up, letting the faint blue light illuminate his face. "This is our lifeline. It contains everything: the blueprints, the test results, the names of people involved. But we can't just dump it online and hope for the best. We need to think strategically." Clara leaned forward, her sharp eyes focused. "First, we secure the data. Then we decide who to trust. There are journalists and activists out there willing to fight for the truth. But we have to be careful. One wrong move, and we're dead." Over the next hour, they hashed out a plan. Using Rachel's connections in logistics, they identified a safe location where they could temporarily store the drive. A friend's cabin deep in the woods, far from prying eyes. From there, they would contact a trusted journalist known for exposing corporate corruption. The key was to act fast, before their pursuers closed in. As dawn approached, they set out again, moving cautiously through the countryside. The fire at Tau Farm had died down, leaving behind a charred skeleton of what once stood. News helicopters circled overhead, capturing footage of the destruction. Clara warned the group to stay low and avoid drawing attention. By mid-morning, they reached the cabin. It was small and unassuming, nestled among towering trees. Inside, they found basic supplies: canned food, bottled water, and blankets left behind by previous visitors. Exhausted but relieved, they barricaded the doors and windows before collapsing onto the floor. For the rest of the day, they worked tirelessly to organize the data. Jack uploaded the files onto multiple encrypted devices, creating backups in case the original was compromised. Clara drafted a message to the journalist, outlining the scope of their discovery and emphasizing the urgency of the situation. Ethan monitored local news channels, keeping an eye out for any mention of their escape. Meanwhile, Rachel kept watch, ensuring no one stumbled upon their hiding place. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, they gathered around a makeshift table to review their progress. Clara addressed the group, her voice steady but tinged with worry. "This is bigger than any of us," she said. "Even if we succeed in leaking the information, there's no guarantee it'll make a difference. These people have money, power, and influence. They won't let this go easily. But we have to try," Jack insisted. "If we don't, who will? This isn't just about stopping Tau Farm. It's about preventing something much worse. Imagine what happens if they perfect Project Prometheus. Entire populations could be controlled, manipulated, turned into puppets. We can't let that happen." Ethan sighed, rubbing his temples again. "I know you're right. I just wish we had more time to prepare. We're amateurs walking into a war zone." Rachel smiled faintly. "Maybe we are amateurs, but we're also survivors. And sometimes that's enough." The next morning, they sent the message to the journalist. Within hours, they received a response confirming receipt of the data. The journalist promised to verify the information and publish it as soon as possible, but warned them to stay hidden. "You've made powerful enemies. the reply read. Don't underestimate them. Relieved but still wary, the group decided to remain at the cabin for a few more days. They took turns keeping watch, rotating shifts to ensure constant vigilance. During the quiet moments, they talked about what might come next. None of them knew whether they'd be able to return to normal lives, or if such a thing was even possible anymore. One night, as Jack stared out the window at the star-filled sky, Clara joined him. Are you scared? She asked quietly. Terrified, he admitted, but also hopeful. For the first time, I feel like I'm doing something that matters. Clara nodded, her gaze distant. Me too. Just promise me one thing. If things go south, don't hesitate to run. Survival comes first. I'll do my best, Jack replied, but I won't give up. Not now, not ever. As the days passed, news of the expose began to spread. Headlines appeared online, detailing the sinister operations at Tau Farm and the existence of Project Prometheus. Governments scrambled to distance themselves from the scandal, launching investigations into the shadowy organization behind it all. Public outrage grew, fueling protests and demands for accountability. Yet amidst the chaos, whispers persisted about similar programs operating elsewhere. The group realized they had only scratched the surface of a much larger conspiracy. Determined to keep fighting, they vowed to continue their work as whistleblowers, shining a light on the dark corners of the world where technology and greed intersected. And somewhere, buried beneath the ashes of Tau Farm, the remnants of Project Prometheus waited silently for the day someone might try again. Weeks had passed since the expose about Tau Farm made headlines, but life hadn't gotten easier for Jack, Clara, Ethan, and Rachel. Instead of finding safety, they found themselves living on edge, constantly moving from one hiding place to another. The cabin in the woods had served its purpose, but staying there too long would have been reckless. After all, the people behind Project Prometheus weren't amateurs. They were professionals who didn't take kindly to being exposed. Their current hideout was a small apartment in a rundown building on the outskirts of Cleveland. It wasn't much, but it was secure enough for now. The windows were covered with blackout curtains, and the door had 3 deadbolts installed just in case. Inside, the group worked tirelessly, piecing together fragments of information that hinted at the true scope of the conspiracy. The apartment doubled as both a refuge and a command center. Laptops hummed softly on a cluttered table, their screens displaying maps, documents, and encrypted messages. Papers were strewn everywhere, some marked with scribbled notes and diagrams. A large map hung on the wall, dotted with red markers indicating locations linked to similar operations. Each dot represented another piece of the puzzle, and another potential threat. Clara sat at the head of the table, poring over satellite images of military bases and research facilities. Her brow furrowed as she traced connections between seemingly unrelated sites. It's not just Tau Farm, she said finally, breaking the silence. There are other places like it, factories, labs, even entire towns set up for this kind of work. They're spread out globally, hidden in plain sight. Jack leaned forward, his elbows resting on the table. So what you're saying is, this isn't just one rogue operation. It's a network? Exactly, Clara replied. And whoever's pulling the strings has deep pockets. These aren't random experiments, they're part of a coordinated effort to develop weapons capable of controlling populations. Project Prometheus might be the centerpiece, but it's far from the only project. Ethan, seated near the corner of the room, sighed heavily. He'd been monitoring online chatter and news reports, trying to gauge the fallout from their leak. Public outrage doesn't seem to be slowing them down, he muttered. Governments are denying involvement, corporations are distancing themselves, and yet, nothing's really changed. Whoever's running this isn't afraid of bad press. Rachel nodded grimly. She held a tablet in her hands, scrolling through classified shipping manifests she'd managed to access using old contacts from her days in logistics. I've been tracking shipments of equipment and materials, she explained. Some of it matches what we saw at Tau Farm. Components for neural interfaces, experimental weaponry, stuff like that. But there's also something new. Biological agents. I don't know exactly what they're planning, but it can't be good. The weight of her words hung heavy in the air. None of them needed to say it aloud. They were dealing with something far beyond their original expectations. What started as an investigation into a suspicious factory had spiraled into uncovering a global conspiracy with terrifying implications. "We need more allies," Jack said after a moment of silence. "We can't do this alone. If we want to expose the full extent of what's going on, we'll need help from people who understand how these systems work and how to dismantle them." Clara agreed. But trust is hard to come by these days. Everyone's either scared or bought off. We have to be careful about who we approach. Over the next few days, the group began reaching out to potential allies cautiously. They contacted former colleagues, whistleblowers, and independent investigators known for challenging powerful organizations. Some ignored their messages entirely, while others expressed interest but refused to get involved directly. Still, a handful agreed to meet under strict conditions: encrypted communications, neutral locations, no names exchanged unless absolutely necessary. One such meeting took place late at night in an abandoned warehouse on the edge of town. The person waiting for them introduced herself simply as Maya. She was a wiry woman in her 40s with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. Her specialty was cybersecurity, and she claimed to have spent years tracking shadowy networks tied to corporate espionage and government surveillance. "You've bitten off more than you can chew," Maya said bluntly after hearing their story. "This isn't just one organization, it's a web. Break one strand and 10 more take its place." "We know it's risky," Jack admitted, "but we can't sit back and do nothing. If we don't act now, they'll keep expanding their reach. Do you think you can help us?" Maya studied him for a long moment before nodding. "I'll lend a hand, but only if you promise to listen to my advice. You're amateurs playing a dangerous game, and mistakes will get you killed." With Maya's assistance, the group refined their strategy. She helped them strengthen their digital security, teaching them how to encrypt communications, detect surveillance, and erase traces of their activities online. Under her guidance, they created a decentralized network of informants and collaborators, each contributing pieces of the puzzle without knowing the full picture. As weeks turned into months, their efforts began yielding results. Leaks surfaced in major newspapers and investigative blogs, exposing links between political figures, defense contractors, and secretive research programs. Protests erupted in cities worldwide, demanding transparency and accountability. For the yacht, first time, it felt like they were making progress. But victory came at a cost. Their movements were monitored more closely than ever. Strange cars lingered outside their safe houses, and unfamiliar faces appeared in crowds wherever they went. One night, while returning from a supply run, Ethan noticed someone tailing him, a man in a dark coat who disappeared into an alley when confronted. When he reported the incident to the group, they decided it was time to relocate again. Their new hideout was a basement apartment beneath a laundromat in a bustling neighborhood. It was cramped and poorly ventilated, but blending into the crowd offered a measure of protection. They continued working, driven by a mix of fear and determination. Every lead they chased brought them closer to the truth, but also deeper into danger. One evening, as they reviewed newly acquired intelligence, Rachel stumbled upon something chilling. Hidden within a series of financial transactions was a reference to Phase 2 of Project Prometheus. Attached to it was a timeline suggesting deployment within the next 6 months. "This changes everything," she said, her voice trembling. "They're not just developing the technology, they're preparing to use it on a massive scale." Clara slammed her fist on the table. "We need to warn people, governments, activists, anyone who'll listen. If we don't stop them now, it'll be too late." Jack nodded, his jaw clenched. "Then let's finish what we started, no matter what it takes." Despite the mounting pressure, the group remained united. They knew the risks. They'd seen firsthand what happened to those who crossed paths with the organization behind Tau Farm. Yet they also understood that backing down wasn't an option. Too many lives depended on their courage and persistence. Late. At night, as rain pounded against the windows, Jack stared at the glowing screen of his laptop. Lines of code scrolled past, representing countless hours of research and sacrifice. He thought about the journey that had brought them here, from the quiet fields of Ohio to the shadowy corners of a global conspiracy. Somewhere out there, remnants of Project Prometheus still existed, waiting to be unleashed. But for now they were fighting back, and as long as they kept pushing forward, there was hope, not just for themselves, but for everyone whose freedom hung in the balance. Months had turned into nearly a year since Jack Miller first stepped foot into Tau Farm. What began as a routine engineering job had spiraled into a life-or-death struggle against forces far greater than he could have imagined. Now, sitting in yet another safe house with Clara, Ethan, and Rachel, Jack felt the weight of everything they had endured, and everything that still lay ahead. The timeline Rachel uncovered was clear. Phase 2 of Project Prometheus was set to launch within weeks. If they failed to stop it, the consequences would be catastrophic. Entire populations could fall under the control of those wielding the neural interface technology. Governments, corporations, and ordinary citizens would become puppets in a grand scheme designed to consolidate power and eliminate dissent. "We're running out of time," Clara said, breaking the silence. Her voice was steady but carried an edge of desperation. "If we don't act now, we'll lose our chance." Jack nodded, his eyes scanning the documents spread across the table. "We've exposed enough to raise awareness, but it's not enough. People need proof. Something undeniable that ties all these pieces together." Ethan leaned back in his chair, rubbing his temples. "And how do we do that? Every move we make feels like walking into a trap. They're always one step ahead of us." Rachel placed a hand on his shoulder, her expression resolute. "Then we stay unpredictable. We hit them where they least expect it." The group spent hours refining their strategy. With Maya's help, they identified key targets: data centers, research labs, and distribution hubs tied to the conspiracy. Their goal was simple, yet audacious: infiltrate one of these locations, retrieve irrefutable evidence of Phase 2, and broadcast it to the world simultaneously through multiple channels. It was risky, almost suicidal, but none of them saw another way forward. Their chosen target was a secure facility located outside Chicago. According to intelligence gathered by Rachel, it housed servers containing detailed plans for Phase 2, including deployment schedules and lists of collaborators. Breaking in wouldn't be easy. The building was surrounded by high fences, surveillance cameras, and armed guards, but it was the best shot they had. To prepare, they split up tasks based on each person's strengths. Clara coordinated logistics, mapping out escape routes and contingency plans. Ethan focused on disabling security systems, using his knowledge of factory automation to hack into the facility's network. Rachel secured fake IDs and transportation, ensuring they could blend in once inside. Jack handled communications, drafting messages to trusted allies who would amplify the leaked information once it went public. As the day of the operation approached, tension filled the air. None of them slept much, their minds racing with worst-case scenarios. Yet despite the fear gnawing at them, there was also a sense of purpose. For the first time in months, they felt like they were truly making a difference. On the night of the mission, the group met in a secluded parking lot near the facility. Dressed in nondescript clothing and carrying minimal gear, they reviewed the plan one last time. Clara handed out earpieces so they could stay in contact during the operation. "Stick to the schedule," she reminded them. "And if anything goes wrong, prioritize getting out alive. The data matters, but your lives matter more." With that, they moved into position. Using Rachel's forged credentials, they gained access to a delivery truck scheduled to enter the facility. Once inside the compound, Ethan worked quickly to disable the cameras and alarms, creating a narrow window of opportunity. Meanwhile, Jack and Clara slipped away from the group, heading toward the server room. The hallway leading to the server room was eerily quiet, illuminated only by emergency lights mounted on the ceiling. Jack's heart pounded as he inserted a USB drive into the lock panel, bypassing the electronic security system. The door clicked open, revealing rows of humming servers stacked floor to ceiling. "Hurry," Clara whispered, keeping watch at the entrance while Jack connected his laptop to the main terminal. Lines of code scrolled across the screen as he searched for the files they needed. Minutes stretched into eternity, every second feeling like an hour. Finally, he found what they were looking for: a trove of classified documents detailing every aspect of Phase 2. He downloaded the files onto multiple encrypted drives, ensuring redundancy in case something went wrong. Just as he finished, an alarm blared throughout the facility. "They know we're here," Clara shouted, grabbing his arm. "Let's go." The pair sprinted back to the rendezvous point, where Ethan and Rachel waited anxiously. Together they retraced their steps, dodging guards and avoiding detection. By the time they reached the delivery truck, sweat poured down their faces and their legs burned from the effort. As they sped away from the facility, explosions lit up the night sky behind them. Someone, or something, had triggered a self-destruct mechanism, erasing any trace of the evidence stored within. But it didn't matter. They had what they came for. Back at their safe house, the group uploaded the files to a network of independent journalists, activists, and whistleblowers. Within hours, the information spread like wildfire, appearing on news sites, social media platforms, and underground forums worldwide. Governments scrambled to respond, launching investigations and issuing denials. Public outrage reached a fever pitch, demanding accountability and reform. For a brief moment, it seemed like they had won. The conspiracy had been exposed, its secrets laid bare for all to see. Yet even as celebrations erupted online, the group remained cautious. They knew better than to believe the fight was over. One evening, as they sat together in the dimly lit safe house, Jack broke the silence. "What happens next?" Clara sighed, leaning back in her chair. "We keep going. This isn't just about Tau Farm or Project Prometheus. It's about stopping anyone who tries to abuse power like this. There will always be others waiting in the wings, ready to pick up where they left off." Ethan nodded grimly. "It's a never-ending battle, but at least now we're not alone. People are starting to wake up." Rachel smiled faintly, her gaze fixed on the glowing screens around them. And maybe that's enough, for now. Though their journey had taken a toll on all of them, they found solace in knowing they had made a difference. Together they vowed to continue fighting, not just for themselves, but for everyone whose freedom depended on holding the powerful accountable. Somewhere buried beneath the ashes of Tau Farm, the remnants of Project Prometheus waited silently for the day someone might try again. But until then, Jack, Clara, Ethan, and Rachel stood ready, determined to shine a light on the darkness no matter the cost.